Writers, readers, drinkers, lend me your ears and your livers. Welcome to Writers Drinking Whiskey Open Bar, the boozy author panel where we dive deep into the liquor and into the writing topics of today. From writing craft to writing life, pop culture, and the rest. I am your host and resident object lesson, William R. Hincy, and we've got a great panel tonight. So, moving on to our pop culture question. Artificial intelligence, which is the best. I think everyone can agree artificial intelligence is the best thing that's ever happened to humanity because our general intelligence is fading and we need something artificial to step in for us. So regarding artificial intelligence, what impact do you think it'll have? Or, I mean, realistically is having. It's not that will have, it's literally happening now. Is having on writing, and would you ever use it? So I think, Matt, we're on you to start us.
Yeah, I might have a quite short and stark take on this, but I am anti-artificial intelligence. I will not use it. And I think robots should be used for robotic things, not expressions of art. I'm kind of stunned. I mean, first of all, it's like amazing software, which is frightening, right? Because I did have a student like turn in a paper, but he told me, and it was the way he said, like, "Oh, look what I did," you know, and it was like, "Oh my God, it's pretty good." So it's terrifying, and I'm sure it's only going to get better because the speeds of these processors and all technology seems to grow at like an alarming. It's like the exact opposite of politics, you know. Politics were like. We're like debating something like, oh, how do you feel about like, you know, this issue that we passed in 1950?
Well, especially American politics, right?
Yeah,
it's grandstanding like, more than...
I'm turning 40 this year. I feel like we have the same issues. When I was like 15, my parents were talking about I'm like, why can't we just move like forward? You know? The technology seems to just blast forward. Like you pick up a phone from 1996. You're like, what is this garbage? You know? So, but it's like alarming. It's disturbing. I'm kind of amazed. There's like literary journals that are doing like author in conjunction or collaboration with AI. And
are they?
Yeah, I've seen this a few times.
Seen that.
I find it like deeply upsetting. You know, like I didn't say it in the Facebook thread, but I saw it and was just like, I won't be submitting there anymore. I forgot the name, but
wow.
Yeah, I was just like we have to be kind of wholly on one side here. And there's a lot of good that can come with robots and doing stuff. But as far as art, screenplay, and we got to keep this like, it's true. It might be an antiquated art form, right? Like technology, you could replace me and probably write books, and and robot Matthew might be amazing. But we have to just kind of draw the line and just say, hey, you know, this is not a human soul. You were talking about bleeding for your work. That's what it's all about, you know, and that can never be replaced. It's, you know, this is an expression. I think of the Lascaux caves in France, where it's like 17,000 years ago, you have humanity that had these very basic needs of food, shelter, water, and yet they found time to put these etchings on the walls in their caves, and we don't really know what they were for. Some people think it was to track seasons or hunting, but there's a lot of people that seem to believe it was storytelling. And
it was storytelling.
It's like, if it is storytelling,
I can give the definitive action.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I
don't believe for a second it was all tracking this.
No, it's true, because if it was
we're humans, we're into art.
Like, they wouldn't have spent all the time like drawing what a buffalo looked like or whatever it was, you know. So you'd figure, well, there's probably storytelling is a fundamental human need, and it needs to be
absolutely
treasured. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. I think it's fundamental. I think when they do that, I actually think it's silly. That's why I joke and say I have the answer, right? I don't have the definitive answers, obviously, because no one does. But would you, if you're living at that time, I need to track the buffalo, I'm going to paint stuff on a wall. No, that's your life. Right. You track the buffalo. Like
you track the buffalo by putting a rock in an area and being like, all right, we go. You know, you don't spend all day combining colors because it's hard to paint then. There's no paint store. There's no, I'm with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you said. What I tend to think with AI too is that it's amazing to some degree. I actually have, so here, I'll give a few of my anti-examples here that I pulled up for the show, right? One is there was an article, where was this article from? I think it was the Business Insider. And there's multiple of it. That's just a random one that is free on the internet, and I can link it up with the show. That all of the current AI, the generative AI, within like a couple generations, like 2, 3, like not far, without input of new human-made work, is going to turn to garbage. They're actually worried about this. ChatGPT, all of them are worried about the fact that, like, no, if it just makes it based on itself, it's going to turn to garbage. And so it still requires human input to do it. And that human input is extremely exploitive, right? Like, I don't think, like, my writing has probably not been used to train, maybe because all of our writing is out in the public space. Maybe some of it
you can
has
actually,
been put in there.
check. There's a site now. Yeah.
Right. But if you're John Grisham, who's one of the people suing them, I think Stephen King is on that list.
New
like
York
a lot
Times
of these writers.
as well.
Right. New York Times. Yeah, you're right. Like, you are taking a lot of real humans' work and not giving them any kickback for it. You're not giving them any choice in the matter. So the whole software is extremely exploitive right now, and exploitive and utterly dependent on humans to feed back into it, because it's going to turn into garbage. And I think it's hilarious to a degree, because it's like, oh, I'm gonna go to ChatGPT. I'm gonna make the next great American novel, right? Well, if there hasn't been any great American novels in the last 10 years, you're gonna make the next American garbage.
Yeah,
because it's garbage in, garbage out. Like, this is how the system works. So,
yeah.
Dan, Daria, you guys have any more thoughts?
Yeah. Dan, did you want to go first?
I'll just agree with that, with all that has been said, which might not be surprising coming from this crowd. But I think, for one thing, I would never use AI to write, because I'm an obsessive person, and writing is my obsession, and I've got to do it. I've got to write. And so that's, I don't want a machine to do this for me. This is it really is part of my identity and part of who I am. But I think what Matt said, I mean, this is AI maybe can replicate intelligence, the human mind, for a time, but it does take human input to determine that, and human value. What counts as brilliance, what counts as garbage, but it's got nothing to do with the soul, and I believe in the human soul, and that's about emotions, and it's about even shadow and darkness and all that's not anywhere to be found there. And that's what we do as writers. That's that's arguably our main territory, to go with the mind. So this just, it seems just kind of pointless to me to even try this, because that's not, it's a useless thing to try to short circuit that profound act of creativity, human creativity, and human empathy, as we were talking before, in inhabiting other voices and other characters. That, this is no thumbs down, 2 thumbs down on AI. So, yeah,
right. Well, and I think there is the AI will never bleed, right? It may
Can't
know
believe.
more about like leaking code because it's not even like a proper robot. It's not even going to leak oil, you know, it may leak code. It may leak ones and zeros, and we may never know what it means to leak ones and zeros like the AI. But it's not going to believe. It doesn't have a soul. It doesn't know what all of those things. So the idea that it's ever going to replace that, I think, is a little misguided. I do understand, though, two things. One is if you're a writer of cozy mysteries, right? Or insert X, right? That's a writer that is I regurgitate, like it's a niche genre, and it's I'm writing the next Harry Potter. This Harry Potter's in Spain. Boilerplate, like our boiler plate. You might be in trouble because if you're talking generative, it's going to be better at generating next thriller of these paint by numbers than a human can.
You can see why publishing corporations would be very interested in this, because they don't need they can cut out the writer potentially, and I think it is. I believe there can be an endpoint where the garbage will start coming in, but for a while you could go with just kind of replicating the same old with romance novels or legal thrillers that are kind of not particularly deep. That
examples.
It could go on for a while, and you could see where that's it's going to be exploited, but it just seems very hollow.
Right. Well, and especially, and what I worry about is who has control of it. Right. It's that if you're the authors, you have control of whether you use it or not. But if it's like, so Sports Illustrated, which we're all of the age actually that probably knows Sports Illustrated from when it actually mattered, right? Sports Illustrated, like if you were on the cover, like, oh, Michael Jordan's on the cover, oh, so awesome, and the swimsuit editions were all guys. I still have them bookmarked,
Oh, yes. February, every February, I would look. Great anticipation.
February, you're right.
Yeah. Yes, warm up the winter.
Right, but they had Sports Illustrated. They used AI writers, headshots, and stories. Right, so
a month or two ago, it was a bit of a scandal.
It broke, the scandal broke. One of my favorite, I took a quick clip from one of them, was that they had one of their writers, and they've admitted now this was all AI, because they had AI headshots, AI biographies, and then AI stories. And this one was about volleyball. And this genius corporate overlord AI says here, volleyball can be a little tricky to get into, especially without an actual ball to practice with. And corporate overlords, like, thank you for that. You're just as foolish and nonsensical as our former overlords.
Used to be some really wonderful writing in Sports Illustrated. I mean, that was probably one of my first ideas of being a writer, was being like 12 and I didn't want to read anything. And all of a sudden that comes and you go, well, maybe I'll read this piece on Michael Jordan or whatever, and then you're like, that was actually pretty good. Why can't I read for school? What's wrong with me? And then you it was like, so it came with who was the guy at the end of Sports, Bill something?
Bill Simmons? I think Simmons had
Bill Simmons, but maybe he was there for a while. There was a guy I was like obsessed with who always wrote like the in closing.
Right at the end, yes.
I don't know if his name was Rick.
I've lost his name. We should look that
too.
up.
But I used to know it so well.
The guy that did Weekends at Maury.
Not Mitch Albom?
Mitch Albom. I think he wrote for Sports Illustrated for a bit.
Stuff, I think. But yeah, there was a guy. It'll come to me. I'll look on the phone real quick.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about, though, but that wonderful, little short piece at the end and closing. Right. Yeah. Perfect. And Yeah. And that and Rolling Stone was another, in my formative years, that another wonderful, influence on with quality writing and journalism. So, but you wonder, where it's going to go when it gets in the hands of those big corporate entities.
I think it'll collapse, but they're the short-term impacts, or what's going to affect us writers, right? Is that there's the gatekeepers, and they're going to let it collapse because it seems cheap. And so I think that's the negative out. But the other one I saw was, this is actually MSN, so Microsoft. Did an obituary for I remember this NBA player because he was 42 when he passed away. I think this was last year. It was within the last year, certainly. And the headline for the obituary for Brandon Hunter is Brandon Hunter, useless at 42. Yes, accurate. Wow. Like AI bot, like he's not useful anymore, but not the most sensitive, or not the way anyone outside of Mother China would. But
he's useful for a great nonfiction hit piece. I can write about him now. I'll add him to my list.
Yeah, and the writer's Rick Riley. It came to
Rick Riley. Oh,
Rick Riley.
Yeah. But it's true. It's like it's also weird because you were saying the same thing, Bill, about like these writers are suing. So the software itself is just like plagiarizing work from authors. Learning the formula. It's got the brain that grows every 5 seconds. So, so it can read like all of our books in 3 seconds. Right. Yeah. So, okay. And then it just starts to learn like, oh, this is what a sentence looks like. But it's only like learning the software that we give it that humans built. So like, in a way, we're just like teaching the world's smartest student how to write. And you know what I mean? And it's like, but it's only writing. It's probably like writing all of our sentences in some way, shape, or form, and learning plot and learning all this stuff at an alarming rate. And so, if that kind of stuff drives me crazy, because it's like, okay, so now you're going to write a bestseller on the backs of all of us or whatever, I think in the future too, like if this is ever going to happen, these things should just have like massive labels on them. If I go into a bookstore, I want there to be like a big orange sticker or something on a book that had any part in AI, right? That is, but I mean, I hope we don't get to that point.
Yeah. I don't think we're that close to it.
Yeah.
And judging by like the whole useless, that was part of the reason I pulled up a few of these that I had heard of them, is that we're not as close as it seems. But
you're right.
I think the flip part is that it is taken away, man. Like it's so exploitive. Like I think if you wanted to use Chat GPT or whatever it might be to help with your chapter synopsis that you're going to submit to an agent, well, they're your chapters. You wanted to write it and you can then edit them. It's okay. Like I actually think, especially from my corporate career, being with medical devices and quality regulatory stuff, I could see how using AI to analyze big sets of data could be really beneficial. So I don't think we don't need to throw it out, but where do you use it? Like, where do we start putting those boundaries? And there was to your point about putting a label on it. And I think I listed it here, but there was a writer that won an award in Japan, like a prestigious award, that admitted she used, AI to write part of it.
Yeah.
And to give her some credit, the story was about AI. And I think from reading on it just a little bit before the show, that AI was infused. And when the AI part was there, she would feed it in and then try to feed it, because she said it was 95% her written. And then AI wrote those 5% and she would kind of work around it. But man, I not to be too impassioned here, but I really think as writers, as artists, like it is time for us to be bold, to stop painting by numbers, to be brave, to push things, to stop trying to be I am the next Harry Potter and this trope's slightly turned. No. The time for all of that passed 10 years ago. The time now is for us to push forward, to take risks, to put the human experience out there, to not think, oh, it's a 3-act play. No, maybe it's a 5-act play. Maybe it's a 7-act play. Go out, be bold, be brave, be the artist the way it was meant to be, the way artists were in the past and still are today, and they're just being suppressed. And then start really pushing, push, your bookstore and your publishers. Give you those people, search those people out. If you're on social media, you can follow Stephen King. Maybe he's a great follow. Maybe there's 100 really worthy artists out there that are going to give you the next 50 years of great work that just aren't getting the attention now. So, that's what I always think with AI is no. This is on us, on all humanity. Art isn't artificial, right? It's in there. Art is part of that word, but it's not. Art is very human. It drives me somewhat crazy. I apologize for ranting, but sometimes, it feels good.
That was, very good rant.
Awesome. So before we depart, any other thoughts on AI or anything else?
I've got a lot of thoughts on it. And, first off, I agree with what everyone says. I agree with all of you on all of it pretty much. And I'm not trying to be the devil's advocate, but I cut my teeth as a reader on science fiction, and I've spent a lot of time reading science fiction, read a lot of it, and thought about it a lot. And first of all, I think we need to be really clear about what we mean by AI. And in this context of this discussion, we're talking about current generation generative AI. So I think there are a lot of threads to this. First of all, we're all territorial, whether we're writers or illustrators. Illustrators are having a hell of a time with AI too. Worse time than writers, because it's actually better at images than it is at words, if you get the prompts right. But there are so many examples in history of creatives and artisans being threatened by new technologies. Whether it's the printing press or photography. Photography was a huge one. Oh my God, it's the end of art. No, it wasn't the end of art. I understand that AI is different, but I think that it's an incremental process. We're at a tiny little slice of the progress of AI now. Can it reproduce the sensations and the visceral, emotive, somatic qualities of human experience? No. General purpose AI or superior AI could. We're stuck with this generative model, which is just, it's pretty low-grade model. It is just building on what's out there. And let's also suggest that as writers, maybe we're all building on what's out there already anyway. Bill's talking about us making a quantum leap here and taking chances, which I agree with. Hard to do. Hard to be totally original. Would I use AI? I think it was Matt who said, or someone said, use it to summarize or synopsis. Something like that. Great idea. I agree. If we had real AI, which was beyond generative and was actually at a more human level, which will be a whole different kind of AI. Would I buy and read a book written by AI? Sure, why not? If it's good, I don't need to be territorial. Actually, I think that we, using the kind of Persian carpet metaphor, we might get to a point where the human produced story is way more valuable and seen as a very special thing, compared to a mass of AI generated stories. It's that way with Persian carpets or anything made by machine as opposed to things made by. So I think we have to really be honest with ourselves and kind of examine our souls and see what part of it is us just being territorial and trying to defend our corner. It's kind of like, if you find that your work is out there on the net, usually on some PDF phishing site,
Right.
I don't give a damn. Why do I need to be territorial about it? I do know there are some big selling writers, especially romance authors, who are actually losing money because of that. But most of the time, they're phishing scams. I don't have to have that visceral territorial reaction. Technology is going to progress. It's always going to be there. I personally don't feel threatened, and I'm kind of, I think we just have to, accept that this has always been the case with technological advance.
Sure.
That's all I got.
Yeah, no. Thanks for giving the voice of the dissent. I would disagree, though, in two ways. One is and this happened in California fairly famously now because they like to publicize it. Is hey, retail theft doesn't affect anyone.
Good point. Good one.
It affects Target. It's a multi-million. Oh, it doesn't matter. But then when that starts to happen in mass, it becomes criminal rings, right? And that's what ended up happening. Like you saw it here in anywhere that pulled that string and said, it doesn't matter. And you started to see where, hey, it did start to matter because it was in mass. AI is in mass stealing from authors.
Yes, that's
it's in mass stealing from Steinbeck and whoever, right? There's some of it's probably public domain, and that's okay. Go train it on the public domain. But King and whoever else, Grisham and all the other folks involved, are being stolen from, and that's a bigger problem.
Yes, I agree.
And that's not fair with it. I really don't. And I'm not overly religious, like, and the story we've talked about, like, but the idea that you can artificially train something to understand what it means to have a soul and to have like some understanding of like that understanding of what the human condition is, to me, is understanding what it is to have a spirit in you that's compelling you to do things that are a little bit beyond just psychology or hormones and things.
So what if we moved beyond the current phase of generative AI and the neuronal networks, achieved let's say they achieve a basic sentience, where they are actually learning perhaps more as a human would, rather than, just stealing from us all. Are we okay with that? Are we okay with something that, apart from not having a meat body, appears to have sentience?
Like the meat body, that maybe. Well, I mentioned it earlier. There is, if you're just making the plot, right? I'm making the next thriller. And some people just want I'm going to read this thriller today, and I'm going to be done today. Don't mess it up, right? I don't actually think there's any problems with that. I think it should be labeled, just to be clear.
Yeah.
But it's going to do that way faster than any human ever can. And that doesn't require any humans anymore. If you're painting by numbers all the time, well, sure, something else can go paint by the numbers better. Hard to. I think there's art, and then I think there's commerce. If your writing is fully commerce, which is where I'd put that, that's kind of what's happening. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're good. Anything else? Anyone else wants to jump in?
Great discussion. Loved it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Really. Yeah. That very mind expansive.
Very good. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys.
Yeah. I'd like to take all three of you down the aisle after this.
Oh, you're so sweet.
I'm not really someone you want to take down the aisle.
Yeah, fair enough.
My ring size is 10.5.
I'm on it.
Thanks for tuning in. If you have a subject you'd like us to cover or something you'd like us to do a deeper dive into, drop us a comment. We'd love to include it on a future episode. The show is a labor of fun, and it's truly a reward in its own right. But if you would like to support me or the other amazing authors I have on there, consider picking up a book. Any of the writers we have on here would be a great addition to your bookshelf. Each one is a master storyteller and just a great person to boot, so you'd be doing them and yourself a great favor in picking those up. And while I would never call myself a master, because that would be, as we said in the 90s, conceited, I do have on a pretty good authority from critics and my mom alike that I'm not bad. So if you wouldn't mind picking up one of my books, that would be great as well. I would appreciate it. Thanks again for watching, and thanks to my great panel of guests for coming on and spending this time with us. Cheers.